Welcome to the podcast. We are so delighted to have you. I'm super excited to talk to you because everything that I've read and just got to research on what you've done and what you're doing is just so interesting to me. So welcome.
Thank you, Ashlan. It's so wonderful to be here, and I'm excited about our conversation today.
Yes, me too. So can you tell us a little bit on how you started your path into learning about natural health and natural medicine?
Sure. Yeah. I think that really stems back to childhood. I grew up in a really kind of healthy household. I grew up in the 70s. So my mom was super into, eating alternative. We had like a meditation room. There was yoga. I mean, like everything. So I grew up in kind of that environment. Of course, in my 20s, I kind of searched out the rebel. I was looking for kind of like the alternative of life.
Yeah.
But then I came back to really learning. I've always had a great passion for cooking and helping people with nutrition and learning about cooking. So that was kind of like the basis through my 20s about how I wanted to start helping people on my own.
Yes.
So then I became a yoga teacher. I went to live at this yoga retreat center in California. It's called Expanding Light. It's in Nevada City. And I lived there for over 6 months, and I did yoga teacher training, and I worked in the kitchen learning even more about natural cooking and how to heal others through food. Then I decided I wanted to go to another level. So I went to massage school, and I learned all about the body, like how to, interact with the body on the physical level and the energetic level, just really learning about that aspect.
Yeah.
And then I started to dive into learning about herbs and aromatherapy, just kind of like a basics, to add into massage.
Yeah.
And I said, this isn't really, I need to move to that next level. I just wanted to be able to, diagnose and understand a lot more about the body, how the body works. So I did researching, okay, what are the schools that are out there? And then that's when I really started to learn about naturopathic medicine. I had heard a little bit about it before. And so I went to a couple of the schools and looked at their campuses, and I was like, oh yeah, this is totally right up my alley.
Yeah.
And I applied, and then I went to school. I started in 2010, and I did the 5-year program. So it's a super intense medical program. And then I graduated in 2015, and now I have my practice.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you started out with kind of that hippie, mom and that lifestyle, which most,
Totally.
the thought about, we usually rebel from our parents. We're like, we're not going to be anything like that. But that planted a seed for you to then kind of come into that on your own. That's amazing.
Totally. And I
how
did have my
lucky.
rebellious years for sure. But I think that we all have that, you just have to try, you're trying to find yourself, and sometimes we don't know what that is. And we have to experimentation starts to happen, right? Do I like this? Do I like that?
Yeah. And I can say the same for myself. My mom was very particular about foods after I think she started to learn about herbs and learn about natural medicine and started taking us to a chiropractor and that kind of thing. So I do agree. But there's like a planting of it that happens that then you kind of are aware. It's almost in your consciousness where, sometimes other people wouldn't even think to go that path,
Yes, totally. I remember I was 5, and I had this really bad bike accident. I flew through the handlebars and hit the curbs, those old black curbs. I don't know if you remember those, but
yeah.
And so I had to go to the hospital and have some things done. But my mom took me to a homeopathic, not physician at the time, but probably like a practitioner. And that was my first experience taking homeopathic medicine, which was a long time ago. And so I think that was the other piece. I had used discussed it as a kid, and remembered what it was and
Yeah.
how it helped me. So there's all these little things along my journey, like little, like you said, planted little seeds.
Yes, exactly. So you've been practicing since 2015, your own
Yeah, I
practice.
graduated. Yeah, I went to Bastyr University in Seattle, and then I graduated in 2015. And then my husband and I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, where I live now. And it's so beautiful here in the mountains. So I have a practice. I did have a large clinic of 18 practitioners, but when COVID hit, I had to close that. And now I'm just doing a solo practice, seeing patients, telemedicine, and then doing programs and retreats all over the world. So it's kind of like that great like combination of me helping the individual and then also my larger vision of helping like the planet.
Yes. So people can find you so virtually. So they could come see you virtually, that's amazing.
Yeah, I see patients all over the world. And it's great because there's lots of different aspects, because telemedicine really catapulted not only my own practice, but just like I think health in general. It allowed, to go much more virtual and lots of resources. Now I have companies that I can do functional medicine testing with all over the world, which is really helpful for myself and for my patients, so that I can be able to, because that's a big part of what I do, being able to see what's going on inside the body, right? So
Yeah,
I like to be
that
able to
was gonna
see
be
that.
my question, was like,
Yes.
how does that, because when you see somebody in person, they can, check your lungs, they can listen to your
Mhm.
heartbeat, they can do all of those things.
Mhm.
How are you able to bridge that gap? That would be my kind of
Mhm.
question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if I'm not seeing a patient in person, I do want them to have that primary care physician either on their team or something they can go to. They have it in their pocket. Like if I'm like,
Okay.
you really need to get that checked out. I'd like you to go get it checked out. Or, refer them out to a specific person that can help them in their area of need, whether that's, like you said, maybe I'm suspecting they have pneumonia based on their symptoms, like you really need a chest x-ray. So that type of a thing. And I could order functional medicine labs for my patients, and I can do that. And I can see that type of thing, like, oh yeah, for instance, the pneumonia, your white blood cells are really high. It looks like you might be experiencing walking pneumonia. Let's make sure we follow through with that.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
And how has it changed for you over the course of the past 3 years? How has the practice, have
Mhm.
you seen more issues? Have you seen less? What has been that kind of experience?
You mean like with the pandemic?
Yes, with the pandemic
Yes.
and
Yeah.
kind of what's happened where, there's been such a heightened focus on health and
Right.
on people
Mhm.
being sick and
Right.
people passing away and people having a lot of issues. And so, have you seen an increase in patient count, you know,
Mhm.
during that time? I mean, obviously,
Yes.
yes, because it's telemedicine and you're getting to connect to
Right.
more people, but in the overall scheme, is it like, wow, this is really there's an increase, or is there a decrease? That's that question.
Right. Yeah, I definitely have seen an increase in my practice. And I think to answer like more even specifically is that with the specific aspects of like the mental health field, like one piece is, people are having more anxiety and depression or being aware of it happening in their system based on the pandemic. It brought them, maybe they had more time to think about their happiness level, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe their stress levels went up and they were noticing different symptoms that they already were experiencing heightened, right? And so that's why they're seeking me out. That's one piece, I think, for sure. And the other piece is like the prevention and wellness. It did bring awareness to a lot of people about like, oh, life is fragile in one aspect, and in a moment, right, we can be gone off the planet. So I want to live the best life. And so I think a lot of people, because I specialize in genetics and epigenetics, so people want to know, what's my genetic blueprint? What's going to help me live the best life? How can I eat the best food, take the best supplements, have the best lifestyle to give me, no matter what, even if I'm on the planet today and not tomorrow, how can I live the best life in the moment?
That makes sense. So, what is a genetic blueprint?
That's a great question. Yes. So there's a couple of pieces to that.
Okay.
One, we're all born with our own specific DNA, unique to us, right? We have a specific genetic pattern, there was that DNA pattern. So that's basically like our physical genetic blueprint that we get from our mom and our dad, or from a donor, whatever that is.
Right.
Or and we also then we get all that from our hereditary genes, right? It's just coming through from the family lineage. Sometimes if we're adopted, for instance, we might not know that, which a lot of times people want to research their genes to learn about that health aspect.
Yeah.
The other piece was we have like a spiritual genetic blueprint where it's coming down from our soul and really helping us to, what is that blueprint coming in from our soul purpose on this planet? What are we to say? Yes, I'm going to come to the earth and do and live my purpose. So I help people on both sides of that. Well, in the emotional, mental too, but helping them see the physical, tangible aspect of their genes from the epigenetic perspective, which is everything around us that influences our genes, whether that's nutrition, stress levels, sleep, water, exercise, and all of that, and emotions, right? All of that influence our physical aspect. And then also helping them to see their spiritual DNA, like what's really going on with their soul to help them achieve that best purpose and best perspective.
That's great. I'd be interested on how you could and this is not even to add more to what you're doing, but this idea that because when I think of spiritual blueprint, I always go back to my astrology and how that chart really is this interesting blueprint that you came through to this planet on. So when I do,
yeah, that's a great addition there for sure.
Yeah, because it can be used to see certain health aspects sometimes. Now, of course, nothing is to diagnose anybody or, I don't ever want to say that's a sole diagnosis is just following your astrology by
Yes,
any means.
right. Yes. Yeah. Right. And that's what genetics is in general. It's not a diagnosis tool. We use it. It doesn't, just because you have like the BRCA gene, for instance, like the cancer gene for breast cancer, does not mean that you are going to develop breast cancer. And I think that's a misnomer that kind of happened through when genetics really started to become more on the scene, right? It's like, oh, I have this gene. That means I'm going to have this. It's, I don't want to know about my genetics. So it created that fear factor, right? But it's actually not true. That's a total genetic myth. Is that when you have that gene, it just means it can be turned on and turned off in a specific way. We have lots of genes in the body. So then we want to take everything, that epigenetic factor, and know that we're doing the best for our environment to have that gene to be not turned on if it was the BRCA gene, to have other genes turned on to help with the process, detoxification, all of those pieces.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I think there is a fear around seeing, oh, I have this gene in my lineage, right? Oh my gosh, that means I'm going to possibly get this. And do you think that people can create, through the power of thinking and through the power of emotion, of fear around it, that then is there any connection between that and the cause or the actual occurrence of a disease or a illness manifest in the body?
Right. Oh, totally. 100%. I believe that every thought that we think manifests in one purpose of it or another. Right. And so when it comes to illness, I think that it's all about manifestation and thought, and especially, let's say, for instance, hypothyroidism, let's say or just any disease in general, but that's one that I think is a common word for most people. So a lot of times what happens I see with patients is they identify with that specific labeling, right? They say, I have hypothyroidism. Then all the aspects of it, I'm going to need this specific support in my life, in telling people that I have this disease and how it affects me. It's the more that you talk about something, the more it manifests, right? Yeah. And so and a lot of times that what I do address with patients is, what would their life look like if they didn't have that disease or that condition because they've created the whole environment. They've manifested their life to live with that particular moment in time of that disease, right?
Yes.
So that can be a really hard place for people to understand and not to feel like, oh my gosh, I created this. Why did I create this?
Right.
It's just part of life. Like we create things and then we have to identify why we created them if we can, and then help to shift things in our life. So definitely manifestation is a big part of health, right? Like just how are we manifesting something? Why are we creating something in our life? Maybe it's to learn a life lesson. Maybe it's to help a family. I mean, there's so many different aspects when it comes to health.
Yeah. And I love when I was reading a lot about what you were saying about getting to the root cause of a disease or an illness, right? How do you do that? How do you get to the root cause? I mean, we all feel like
Right.
we have all these emotions. Is it that thought is it that worry I had 3 years ago about my job, or is it the fear that I carry with me every day, or is it the stress of just daily life? How can you pinpoint the root cause of an illness or
That's a really great question. Yeah. So I think one is like looking at the body from a holistic standpoint, but there's a little bit of compartmentalizing with that in the way it comes to system analysis. So let's say, for instance, like I'm looking at step one is to look at a timeline of the person's life. So in the first kind of like initial visit, I'm asking lots of questions about how was your, even the conception when your mom was in that stage where you're conceiving you, what was that like? What was that environment like? What was the family life like at that time? So I create I go through the health history with a patient and see that whole timeline. And that could be a specific physical trauma, or it could be an emotional trauma, right? And so all of that is mapped out. So I can see kind of like, okay, these are the things that are happening on all levels. And then I look at it from a systems point of view, like, okay, how is the stress component? How are the hormones within that component? How's the digestive system, right? And so those systems can then start to be like the keys of the puzzle, locking into place and saying like, the root cause is coming from like an underlying, let's say, for instance, somebody today has extreme digestive issues. And then when I look back through the timeline, maybe I can see like, oh, there was a history. Maybe they didn't have they weren't breastfed. Oh, and then they had series and series and series of allergies and antibiotics, really killing all of the flora in the gut, right? So it lays that kind of like map.
Yes.
Maybe then that created an autoimmune disease, like maybe celiac came into play, or hypothyroidism, or, Hashimoto. So it really helps to like, you have to see the whole picture. That's what I think is missing in like the allopathic world of medicine, because they just see you in that like small moment in time. They do ask some questions, but they're not seeing that whole family history, right? Of your history, really seeing like what sparked a traumatic peak of your timeline of health, right? Where it's like, oh, this happened. And that could be like, maybe it was, I don't know, maybe something happened in stress and you had like a trauma, like a divorce, right? That's huge for people, or like moving, these huge traumas that cause health issues. So we have to look at the whole picture.
Yes, that's so interesting. And I do know, kids that weren't breastfed typically showed higher rates of allergies. That was right. That's kind of a known thing. Is there anything that would pertain to like I don't know, there's something coming up in the back of my head about emotions being trapped in the body. And the reason I want to talk about this is because through your book and Adora's book, the Beautiful Detox, Nourish, and Activate, there's a lot of talk about trapped traumas in the body. So I always think of it as like an emotion. Maybe you got really sad about something and it kind of holds itself in the physical body. How do you pinpoint that? I know there are certain massages or things you can do, but is that just through pain? Do you feel it because of the pain point, or how do you know where it is?
Right. Yeah, it can be from a pain point for sure. Like if someone's holding, but sometimes we don't understand, like you were mentioning, the root cause of something. Sometimes we don't understand where that root cause comes from in the relationship of where it's showing up, like a referred pain pattern or a referred aspect of the gut or something, because something can be traumatized and then thrown off balance, right? And so when we're thrown out of that, sometimes we can compartmentalize, like you said, something to like bury the pain until we're able to then address it, right? And that can then manifest as an emotional piece of trauma, as an emotional piece, maybe, you're the way you communicate, because you're like, oh, I just have to bury that because I can't express my truth, right? Or you could say then maybe that then manifests as something with the thyroid, because it's all in the throat, right? The throat chakra, the communication, the physical. So we have to look at what is happening. I look a lot at the energy centers in relationship. Like if somebody has gut problems, hormonal problems, we have to look at the second and third chakra. What's going on in there? Is that energy moving through the system? Looking at the meridians, how's the body responding and moving through life? What's your power center? How are you holding your place? How do you walk through a daily event? How do you manage the way that you communicate with others, and how's your response to life?
Mm. So it's almost like having a little piece of therapy in there as well, right?
Oh yeah. Yes. And yeah, when I was in school, we were trained, just like a year of counseling, but I usually I do a lot of that piece with my patients, but if it's something really deep, I refer out, because it's not, sometimes I can see like, okay, you're going to need lots of sessions of talk therapy. And I need to refer you out to someone that can do that on a deeper level.
Yes.
So there is that piece, and that's why there's great health practitioners all over the world for that referral.
Absolutely. I know there's thank goodness.
Right.
It's a huge component. And two,
Totally.
it's all connected. We've learned so much over the past, I want to say 10 years or so. It hasn't even been that long, but about gut health and about, digestion issues, and how all of a sudden no one can really eat everything anymore.
Yeah. What happened? Why did that happen? Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, what's going on? We all have our own theories on it. I know mine are, sometimes crazier than others, but what is going on? Really? What's your opinion on what is going on?
Yeah, I think that there's the piece of that is the change in the food quality. That's huge. Not only but also people's food choices, so I think food quality, eating things that they're not making, eating processed foods, and having, again, we have to look at the emotional component, what's changed in the person's own lifestyle, right? That can then affect the gut. The gut is all about stress and how we handle stress and our power center, like I mentioned. So one is food, our relationship to food. Are we growing our own food? What kind of food are we buying? Is it being processed, genetically modified, tainted with chemicals, all those pieces.
Yeah.
So that's a huge piece of your health, right? So I'll test for heavy metals to see if there's heavy metals in someone's system. Test what's their toxicity level, doing a toxicity questionnaire, seeing if they have mold in their system, candida, yeast. So there's so many symptoms that can be tied to food that is affecting the system, food sensitivities, food allergies. There's a study that was done that showed that the most standard Americans, and with that eat a standard American diet, eat the same 30 foods. It's like, we don't have this variety and rotation. When we go to the store, it's like, you go like, I'll have this red pepper, I'll have this zucchini, I'll have, I don't know, the crackers, all those things.
Yeah.
And so variety is a huge piece. So eating healthy, of course, eating the proper fruits, vegetables, nutrients, fats, proteins, but also a variety of foods, and eating seasonally. You're like, okay, in the winter, of course, we're not going to have all of the fruits and things like that we have in the summer. So we don't want to be just focusing on things that are not grown in our own climate and shipped, from like
Yeah.
Chile,
Yeah.
like a box of blueberries from Chile,
Yep.
right? So it's like you want to be able to focus on things that are supporting you in a healthy way, but also being cognizant of the environment, the seasons, and having a big variety. And so I always suggest eating a rainbow of foods. When you go to the store, pick the rainbow. Like, okay, I'm going to have purple cabbage, and I'm going to have red beets, or, red pepper, and I'm going to have orange carrots and lemons, because you want to give all those specific vitamins and nutrients come from the different spectrum of the rainbow, right? So we want to make sure we're eating the rainbow every day.
That's it. That's wonderful advice. Do you think that there are people like myself who typically I don't change my diet that much. Mine is like very consistent. I have a banana and almond butter in the morning, and
Mhm.
it's very, very, very consistent. And it's been that way for, I want to say 10 years. I stopped eating meat, and that wasn't for any other reason than I love meat. I love like actual, just I do. I love meat. But I was having when I was doing deep meditations, I found that I was picking up on the animals' stress
Mm.
responses, whatever was in my body, and I wasn't
Right.
able to connect. Yes, but it's
Mhm. Mhm.
wild even saying that, because you would have told me that before I was doing Kundalini, and I would have been like, oh yeah, bull crap, right? And then I start trying to do it, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's right. I have like a fog above my head is what it would feel like.
Mm.
So I was
Mhm.
like, okay, I won't eat that anymore. Um, but yeah, what do you think about somebody who is consistently eating the same things? I but I do have allergies.
Mm.
I do
Mhm.
have allergies that are that I always pertain to stuff in the sky, like
Mhm.
heavy metals, right?
EMFs, oh, heavy metals, right?
Yeah,
Mhm. Things like that.
EMFs and heavy
Mhm.
metals. And so I always
Mhm.
think that that's what my body is absorbing, and that's what's affecting me, because it typically is
Right.
sinus and respiratory when I
Mhm.
get inflamed. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so it can be definitely be environmental, right? So when someone has food allergies, like you're just describing,
Mhm.
there's two things that I like to look at. One would be looking at the piece of um, food sensitivities, doing food testing. But that's not the gold standard, like food
Mhm.
allergy testing, right? The gold standard is to really do an
Mhm.
elimination. And that's just eating like, super, super, super clean, and
Yep.
then reintroducing the foods that you think might be triggered. And those could be corn, wheat, gluten, the nightshade family. There's all kinds of different things. So you want to, then you eliminate all of the trigger foods, all of the inflammatory foods, and then you reintroduce them in one at a time to see how you react if you have those specific symptoms. Like for instance, I had a patient who had lots of diarrhea, on and off, like, intermittent. And
Right.
so I said, okay, let's do an elimination diet, because we'll do the food testing first and see, if what we see from that, but then
Yeah.
we'll do an elimination diet. And as soon as we eliminate it and we give the body time to clean, right, with probiotics and all, getting the gut back on track. And then when we started to reintroduce, immediately dairy came in and the diarrhea came. And she's like, oh my gosh, I think I'm allergic to dairy. I was like,
Yeah.
yep, I think you are. So, and then, every
Wow.
time the person like goes out and like, well, today I think maybe I'll have some dairy today. And then she'll like send me a message. Yeah, it didn't go so well. So I'm like, well, it's such a great awareness, because I think,
Yes.
a lot of times we don't understand that our body, and it doesn't have to be permanent, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's permanent. We're changing all the time, but have this awareness, like, oh, if I eat that, my body's like, no, that's not,
Yeah.
but sometimes when we're flooded with all the different other foods, we can't identify it.
Yes, I completely agree. And I've actually done the elimination diet back in that
Mhm.
way back when. And yes, dairy is a culprit. That one is that's
Tricky.
that's a tricky one, right? So I feel like
Mhm.
for most people, it probably has some sort of effect.
Yeah, yeah,
Mine was
not
a like a headache. I would get a headache.
headache.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. From cow's milk.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, did you try the other types of dairy like cow, goat and sheep, all the other forms?
I didn't.
Mhm.
In hindsight, maybe I should have. I just stopped eating cheese altogether and stopped eating any milk, drinking any milk, or
Mhm.
not that I did, but and then using almond milk. But there's so many things with even almond milks and oat milks and
I know.
all this
Right. Yeah, we can't
other
live in a
stuff.
bubble, right? Yes, no.
Yeah.
It's
So
hard. It's hard.
it's a hard balance to just
Right.
be anymore, is what it feels like, to eat
Mm.
well. What would you say is your most your strongest recommendation for a probiotic that
Mm.
typically works well for people who are really wanting to try to start a probiotic that their gut needs a little bit of help?
Yeah. Well, that depends. So there's different types of bacteria.
Okay.
So we want to see, if someone's having a lot of gut issues, I'll do a gut zoomer test, which is a stool analysis, which will show me what type of bacteria is in the gut, good and bad bacteria, because I want to be recommending a probiotic that is going to help with that bacteria. Because there's, in a general, we can take a general probiotic, just basic lactobacillus. We can take specific things that are in a general. But if someone's having real gut problems, I got to see like what's going on in there to make a good recommendation for. And then there's also the aspect of different potencies of probiotics, right? They can range from 2 billion all the way up to 100+ billion. So if someone has had, a really extensive like round of antibiotics, I'm going to put them on a much higher dosage because we want to repopulate the whole gut. Like for instance, there was a study that was done that showed that it takes 6 years now, which is crazy, to repopulate after antibiotics. So I think that there needs to be more research on that. I definitely have heard 6 months, but I saw there was a study, and that studies are always jaded in some sort, but the
that
main point of that
that's
is
a
like,
long
yeah,
time,
that's a
right?
long time, right? Because it
Yeah.
wipes out everything. And, we have bacteria everywhere in our body,
Right.
especially in the gut, but I'm mainly in the tube I'm talking about, right? The mouth, all the way through the gut, through the vaginal area. So if we're eliminating all of that, we have to repopulate it. And so that's a big piece. So, and to answer your question, I know that didn't really answer it in the way maybe you wanted me to,
No,
but
it's
there's
good.
not like a general probiotic. It's really very individualized, and that's what health is in general, right? So overall, if I'm someone, I will just put someone on just like a basic probiotic. I'm saying like a megaspore, something that's really going to help repopulate their gut. And I usually recommend doing that at night. And the reason for that is your body's in that resting, rejuvenating, restoring phase at night.
Yeah.
And so during the day, we have all this other stuff going in, right? Life, food, stress. So if we have the moment in time at night, then our body can take that probiotic and be like, oh yeah, I can heal, I can move it through the gut. And so I always recommend taking them at night.
Okay. That's a great that's a good recommendation. I have been taking I started my 9-year-old actually, who's had a little bit of issues with his own tummy and his mood. To be honest, it's been his
Right.
mood that's
Mm-hmm.
can be very aggressive at times. So I thought, why don't we try a probiotic? Because I've been hearing about some correlations between mental issues and probiotics. And um, we started one called Seed. I don't know if you've
Mm-hmm.
heard of that one, but
Mm-mm.
it's for children. It's they have a children's version for pediatric version, and he seems to be doing really well on it. And I've noticed a shift in his personality and how he's able to control his anger actually a little bit more. So So and I don't want to say it's just the probiotic, but it seems to be affecting him. Um,
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. We have so much of the gut brain connection. It's huge. If I see a patient who's experiencing a lot of gut problems or gut, dysfunction and a lot of brain, which could be brain fog, it can be anxiety, it can depression, all of those neurotransmitters have a connection between the brain and the gut, especially serotonin, that feel good neurotransmitter.
really?
So if we are helping the gut to repopulate with good bacteria and also reestablishing the gut-brain connection, then we can help with that mental piece. So there's a lot of probiotics that will be specific to that. Well, they'll be like, it'll say like a neuroprobiotic or something. There are ones that are geared towards the specific aspects of the gut and the brain connection, for
Mm,
sure.
that's so interesting. Would you say that everybody should, or everybody who's maybe dealing with a mental health issue, maybe it's
Mhm.
depression, or should seek out somebody like yourself to get a full check to see what type of probiotic or what type of thing that might work for them?
Oh yeah. One piece of that is I think that antidepressants are really killing our world.
Yeah.
So yes, if you're experiencing anxiety, depression, any type of mental health, issues, you definitely want to have a full workup with a practitioner like myself to see the functional medicine side of things, to see what's happening on the hormonal level, to see what's happening in the gut, to work with the trauma piece, right? Having that practitioner like myself who has enough knowledge and maybe also bringing in someone to work with the energetic piece,
Mm,
what's going on with the connection with the spirit, what's really weighing you down, right? And that's important. And there's a lot of pieces that can be missed when you go in and just say like, oh yeah, I'm depressed to your practitioner, and then you get prescribed an antidepressant. That is
mhm.
just horrible. I've seen, so I work a lot with patients with coming off of those antidepressants, and
Oh, you
which have
do.
lots of side effects, extreme side effects, right?
So
Yeah,
many.
suicidal, constipation. I
Mm,
mean, there's just a list of side effects with those, and they don't always realize that the actual antidepressants are making them worse because they don't know how to like, get off of them because they think of it's helping them in a way, supporting them, right? Helping them to
right.
live. But it's actually the
Right.
complete opposite. It's suppressing their life, their vitality, their reason for live, their joie de vivre, right? That whole
Mm,
like
yeah,
their life is suppressed.
right. I
Mhm.
being somebody who's took, I took antidepressants all through my 20s.
Mm.
Because I was in severe depression about 22, after my son was 2 years old, and the person I thought I was going to marry and spend the rest of my life with, it, even though I was 22, decided to go a different path, and
Mhm.
so it was um pretty for me. It was it was that moment in time, being left with a 2-year old, and I just couldn't cope. I couldn't
Right.
function. I was
Mhm.
so sad, and it was, and for my own, well, not just my own well-being, but for the well-being of Jack, I couldn't not take something because I needed to get past
Mhm.
that point, but there was no one else to guide me in a different
Right.
direction at that time.
Yeah.
So by the time I was getting off of the medication in my late 20s, 28 or so, 27, 28, it was so hard to get off, Dr.
Yeah,
Lulu.
it's it's
It was
very hard.
like getting off of heroin, is what it
Right.
felt like. Even
Mhm.
I don't know what that is like, but that's what it felt like.
Right. Yes. In some
Yeah.
world, that's what it would feel like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, antidepressants and pharmaceuticals in general, but antidepressants, they change the brain pattern, right? So they're
Yes.
changing the brain communication, and hormones are the same way. Anytime we take like a birth control pill, it changes that hormonal brain pattern, that hormonal communication.
Yeah.
And so when we get off of them, it's like we have to restart that communication pattern, reboot it, and be supported completely with natural therapy, right? Whether that's taking an herb or a supplement or anything, food, nutrition, talk therapy, all those things, because it's not easy. Like you said, you want to be supported. And I fully make sure the listeners out there, I'm not recommending to stop your medication without working.
No, not at all.
That's what I was saying. Yes.
Yes.
You definitely want to be checking with your practitioner before, and most antidepressants have to be titrated slowly, right? Because you can send yourself into like a total cyclone of just despair, because you're not supported. Your brain's like, whoa, what's happening? Right. So it's really important to be supported.
So important. And I know that there's like a wean down factor if you do.
Yeah.
Would you say that you can, we talk about how, antidepressants and things even like Valium, but they restructure the nerve waves, the neural pathways in your brain. When you come off of them, is there a way to restructure them back?
Yeah. So part of that is, I always work with a patient with detoxification with any type of pharmaceutical, but especially when it comes to antidepressants. So you want to do a full detoxification on the physical level, like really getting the liver to be clear, because the liver is our phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification organ. And we want to get that cleaned out of the system fully. And then also we want to clear out, from the genetic DNA standpoint, the pharmaceutical imprint. So pharmaceuticals come in, and even an herb, it's like you could think of it like a TV screen, right? And so it's like this film goes over, right? It's like an imprint of the communication. So we want to clear that particular piece off, so that particular imprint is not in the system anymore, where you don't have, it's almost like a residue. That's a good way to describe it. Like this residue in the system. So we want to make sure we're supporting the DNA to have this replication when it's making a new cell, where it doesn't have that imprint anymore, because we have so many cells in the body. So if a cell, which we're going to go back to biology, we know that a cell, it replicates, right? And so if we have a cell that has had this particular way of behaving in the system based on a pharmaceutical, it's going to replicate with that same behavior, right? It's like, oh, okay, I had this, and now I'm going to replicate as this. So we have to have that new cell be cleaned out, right? And detoxified, and that imprint to go be released, so that when it replicates, that DNA is in that new pattern, whether that's back to the old pattern, or most of the time it's like a whole new pattern, right? We're figuring out like what's going on in the body, what's that next phase of health. So it's, that new cell is different. Cells regenerate every 90 days, the red blood cells do. So, that really helps us to know it's going to be that 90-day regeneration pattern within the body from the red blood cell perspective.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. So so it's not that your brain is forever kind of damaged or
no.
Okay.
No, and our brain is very, the liver is one of our most regenerative organs, but the brain is very easily able to adapt, right? I mean, we're only using such a small percentage of our brain, but it's very easy to turn on and turn off specific communication brain waves. We can use, like I meant, there's lots of different things. And my book is great for that, about talking about the different ways to detox your brain, nourish your brain, energize your brain, really with specific herbs, nutrient supplements, aromatherapy, those types of things, meditation, to really help to open up the brain passageways, and also that spiritual level, right? You want to reconnect, because there's been something, like you mentioned earlier, with meditation and Kundalini, like when we're on those specific antidepressants, we're changing that way that we're receiving information, right? From our guides, our ancestors, our soul, our true self, all of that shifts. So we have to reestablish that, and everything is healable. No, everything has the capability of healing.
Regeneration. Yes, healing.
Yes.
Where is that in the book? What chapter is that? And you're talking about in detox, nourish, and activate.
Yeah. So the whole mood chapter. Yeah. So plant and vibrational medicine for energy, mood, and love. So energy is about the adrenal system. So that's everything that you would need for energy. Mood is all about the brain and the nervous system, and love is the cardiovascular system. So you can go to the mood chapter and see all the different aspects of how you can detox the system using, like, for example, like turmeric to really helping things to move through the system. Or you can activate the body or nourish. So yeah, that's a good place to go for the brain for that one.
Yeah, that's great. And turmeric is also really great for inflammation, right? Is that
Oh, yes. Good for gut inflammation, systemic inflammation. I use it for so many sources. I love it. It's a wonderful herb. It's really easy for people. So yeah, it's like one of the superfoods.
yes.
And it's great. Like, the color yellow, it's so good for the gut. That like power center. I like to use it myself. I use it in a daily detox drink where I'm putting turmeric and lemon water and apple cider vinegar and salt to open up my cells, to really get everything moving in and out of the gateway of the cells, to decrease daily inflammation and to detoxify, to get everything like moving through.
Oh, that's a good one. It was lemon water. Wait, repeat that one more time.
Oh, yeah. So I take half a lemon,
Okay.
half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon of turmeric, depending on your taste level. I add in 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. I add a little bit of salt, pinch of salt, a little bit of black pepper to help with absorption in the body. And then sometimes I'll add a little bit of honey. It kind of depends on like what I'm feeling, or if I'm working with patients with that same thing. It kind of depends on your nature. And then you always want to, like, after you drink that in the morning, just to make sure you rinse your mouth out. Same with lemon water by itself, but turmeric can stain the teeth. So you want to make sure you just like rinse out your mouth afterwards to make sure you're not like leaving like residue of yellow on your teeth.
Yes, it can stain your teeth and it can stain your clothes.
Yeah, it's very strong.
It's very strong. We just made a mask. We're working on a line for the store, product line for Muse. And we're doing a turmeric and honey mask.
Ooh.
Really good for
Yeah.
inflammation and all sorts of things. But I've used it a couple times and I was laughing because I was like, you could tell because my towels are now
Right. Oh, yellow.
are now
Yeah,
yellow.
it does not come out.
No, it
Yeah,
doesn't.
it doesn't come out. Yeah, when I was in India or in Nepal, actually, yeah, have you seen the gurus who are just all yellow, right? It's they use that turmeric powder. I mean, they're completely yellow.
I never thought of that. Is that what it is? So that they're using
Yeah, it's like that topical like powder, like they're just like yellow from like head to toe.
Oh God, so funny. Yeah, it's definitely it's powerful especially for people. I mean, I start to get just I feel like when my headaches, and so I use it for that. I use when I drink turmeric tea and things like that.
Yeah.
It's because I feel, like a headache or migraine coming on. And can you talk a little bit? I mean, this is a whole other kind of subject matter, but we touched on the environmental effects of health and how our environments, say it's EMFs, too much EMF frequency, or whether it's stuff in the air. Do you notice that more happening in patients that live in big cities or that are around technology more, or is there any type of indicator, or is it just anyone and everyone is experiencing these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely people that live in a bigger city are having a lot more exposure. Just, being outside in your environment, breathing the air around you, like the cars, the exhaust, the what's on the ground, filling up at the gas station, all of those pieces, EMF being, having more around you in a bigger city. So definitely see that for sure. And doing more frequent detoxification. Like usually in like a general sense, I recommend that people do a detox, not like a crazy, you're on the toilet detoxification. I'm talking about like a gentle detoxification once every three months, right? So every
Okay.
season you're doing something to really, maybe like over a week, you're really helping your body be lighter, cleaning it out, bringing your body some supplements to help with like glutathione, help your liver, like those types of things. But if someone lives in an environment that's very toxic, even if you're working with a lot of EMFs, a lot of computers, maybe you're working as a hairdresser, if you know that you're working in a toxic environment, I'll recommend people do like every month they're doing at least one weekend a month, right? And then they're doing a longer week every 3 months. And that depends on the person and what their environment is. And heavy metal testing can help with that, or a toxicity questionnaire to really see what the impact is. And hormone testing is also important. Our hormones are greatly impacted by toxins. And so that's really important. And we're seeing in the place with that is our load is changing, right? So if we looked at ourselves 20 years ago, we had much less in the environment that was affecting us. So now we have this greater load that is around us, and our bodies can
Yeah.
only handle like so much, right? So if we're going to have more coming in, we have to have more output, more input, more output.
Right. What do you think about, or what's your opinion on charcoal and doing daily or weekly? I don't know how often someone would do it, but charcoal for just like environmental kind of toxicity.
Activated charcoal.
Yeah.
You could do that in a daily drink. I use a lot with gut patients. I have a lot of gut dysbiosis. So doing a little bit in water as a daily drink, and then doing like the probiotic at night, that will help really replenish the system, get the toxins out. You do want to be careful you're not depleting yourself with too much charcoal. So it can be very drying for the system, and it also can pull out things, like it's almost like a chelator. So it will pull out a lot of things from the system. So if you are taking it, you want to take it away from any other supplements for sure. Give your body space. And then I wouldn't recommend doing it long-term, and then repopulating, replenishing, restoring your system.
Okay. Thank you for that. Cause I've always heard about it, and I've tried it a couple times, but I don't know. I do know that it can actually do that reverse thing as well. It can absorb other things that are good.
Yeah. I'll use it when I personally use it. I'll use it for that week that I was talking about. Like when I do a nice cleanse for a week, I'll bring in charcoal, probiotics, things like that are going to help my liver to work, milk thistle, glutathione, all of the antioxidants, A, C, E, vitamin, selenium, and zinc, really get things moving through the system to fight off those free radicals, to protect the cells, bringing in all types of things to help the body to absorb like a pillow, right? You want like absorbing all the things, just like it's vibration. You want the vibration to be strong in your body.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And it's important just even for that. I mean, that increases mental health when your vibration is strong.
Exactly.
Yeah. My last question, and this it's been such a wonderful podcast. I have so many questions. I have so much to talk about, but what have you used biohacking devices in any of your practices?
Yes. I think the most common thing that I use in my practice as far as biohacking goes is like, this is not necessarily a device, but it is, yes, it is. I would classify it as that, using like a sauna form, like whether that's like a heated mat and then a cold therapy, because it's so easy for people to use. That would be like a more, like a detoxification and energizing piece using hot and cold therapy, right? So that's one. And then as far as tracking, I think that the easiest thing that gives people the most data depending on their system. So it would either the Aura Ring. I love using the Aura Ring because it's going to track your sleep. So good. And so if you have insomnia, sleep problems, that's really good to be able to track that. The other thing would be a glucose monitor to really help track your metabolism, because you can it's so amazing as a biohacker to see how your body is responding in the moment to something. You're like, oh, I exercised. This is what happened. I ate this particular food. Oh, look, this is what happened to my glucose. And it's so empowering for women, especially in those who are moving from into perimenopause and menopause, as their body starts to change and metabolism changes, and they can, I can't ever lose that weight. I've tried everything, right? Well, let's try the glucose monitor and see how what's going on in your system. What are you eating? Is it affecting you?
Yeah.
How's your exercise? And the genetics can be a big component of that. So I like I answered with more than one thing. Those are my top 3.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I know it's such a broad topic, and to be honest with you, you just keep talking, and it sparks so many other things within my brain, but we're gonna have to cut it because it's already been almost an hour. So I am just so grateful to have had you on, and honestly, just to have this amazing insight in a way that so many of us struggle with different health issues or health concerns, and it's like we know and we're aware that there are underlying factors to most of them, but like in typical practices, you don't hear about what they are, or how you can even go back and start to figure it out. So thank you for bringing that perspective to us. And I would love to talk more. We can maybe even another podcast about women's health, and that time, between our menstruation and menopause, that is so interesting. And me being now 42 and kind of going into what feels like perimenopause, even though I'm probably not, but I have in my mind that perhaps I am, because my hormones feel kind of out of whack.
Different.
Yes.
Yeah. Time to get some hormone testing done, most likely.
Yeah.
Yes. I would love to come back and talk about that. And if you suspect, most likely there's something, trust your intuition, right? Listeners out there, and we have some hormone testing done. When it comes to moving into perimenopause and menopause, you want to be proactive, right? Because you don't want it to let go too far on the other side of the coin, because then you can have thyroid problems, adrenal problems, it can just snowball on you. So you want to make sure that you're really proactive with that, for sure.
Okay. That's good. That is our next topic, just FYI.
Okay, great. I'm on it. I'm ready. I'm excited already.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for
much
having me on.